Thank you all for coming. Yes, tonight we're going to be speaking about the pyramids. Today's date. I always like to put the Egyptian date from the Egyptian calendar on the first slide. Now, when they started the calendar was the first time. It was the time of creation. So everything at the time of creation was the primordial waters, and everything was chaos. And the Ben stone was the first mound of earth that rose out of that primordial soup. Up here we have depictions of the Ben stone. The Ben stone in alchemy is known as the Philosopher's Stone, which was immortalized in Harry Potter. But this one here, it's pre-dynastic representation with Horus on top. This Ben stone is later. It has the Ba of the pharaoh on top. The Ba is the earthly essence of the pharaoh or his body. And right here we have the Ben stone as a step pyramid with the body of the pharaoh. And the thinking is that the pyramids are representations of the Ben stone. Now, down here we have the development of the pyramids. Pre-dynastic times, burials started out as just small pits. They took the dirt from the pits and piled it on top of the pits, making a mound. Eventually, the pits got deeper and the mounds got bigger. And then the mounds turned into small buildings made out of mud brick. They're called mastabas. And the pits got more elaborate. And eventually, we'll see how those mastabas turned into pyramids. So here we have a couple pit burials to look at, and pretty much throw the body in, put it in position. It's so dry the bodies would turn into mummies. We could branch off into mummies from there, but we're going to head into the pyramids. And here we have some mastabas. You can see they got pretty elaborate. After the pyramids, the initial pyramids, they started building mastabas out of stone. We'll see that in a moment. This mastaba right here, very important because it was the very first mastaba that had its burial chamber lined with stone. This man right here, the architect, nobody knows what he looks like. This is a depiction of him from the New Kingdom because he was so famous for what he did. He designed this tomb for Casa Kamui, but he was also the designer of the step pyramid. His name is Imhotep. And Imhotep brings us to the stars of our show. We've got the step pyramid, and in order, this is the pyramid at Meydum, the bent pyramid, the red pyramid, and the great pyramid. And this is only about halfway through the Old Kingdom. I'm long-winded, so we're going to not actually talk about the 5th and 6th Dynasty pyramids that much. But the step pyramid, it's impressive. Now, the Great Pyramid is incredible, but the step pyramid is very impressive. And the way it came about was after building the burial chamber for Casa Kamui out of stone, Imhotep, hired by the next pharaoh, Zoser, to build his tomb. Said, well, we've been building these mastabas, these low flat buildings that covered the tomb. They used to build them out of mud brick. But he said, well, we can build this one out of stone. And it worked so well that he finished. Zoser was still young enough, spry enough. The thinking is, Zoser said, great, build it bigger. I'm still alive, we've got plenty of time before I die. Don't want my tomb standing finished waiting for me. So first, he built the mastaba a little bit bigger on each side, and then even a little bit bigger. But he came up with the idea, well, why don't we build a mastaba on top of a mastaba? But why stop there? We'll build a mastaba on top of a mastaba on top of a mastaba on top of a mastaba. The step pyramid is damaged enough that we can see the interior well enough to see that first we have the low mastaba, then the four-step pyramid, Zoser said, great, make it bigger. So we've got the six-step pyramid, which is the final structure. The step pyramid, it's an entire complex. It's really quite impressive, and it would have been incredible when it was brand new, but that's a whole nother story. This here, that's Zoser himself. This statue used to have crystal eyes, they believe. The eyes were dug out, and I want to throw in interesting things. My plan is to describe how the pyramids got to the state they're in now, and also throw in interesting things along the side. So the North Temple here, which is right on the north side of the step pyramid, is where this statue was found. They actually now have a facsimile of the original statue in there. And this statue is sitting in its little enclosure, its naos. It's sitting with two eye holes cut in front of it, and it's tilted up 13 degrees so that Zoser can always look at the stars in the north that go round and around and never set. The Egyptians called these the unperishable stars. And that's where the pharaoh headed when he died, because the pharaoh was unperishable. And other neat things about this pyramid, underneath, there's 3 miles worth of tunnels. So tunneling is no problem for them. It's quite dangerous. They don't let a lot of people in there. I wanted to go when I was there and couldn't get permission to that one. But right here over the main central pit, it's sealed with these large limestone blocks, and it's got this huge plug block. And I just can't picture them putting that there without levers. I think they built the pyramid with levers. That's another story. We're not going into pyramid building tonight. It's thought that Imhotep outlived Zoser. So Zoser died, was buried in his pyramid. Nobody knows exactly where, because his mummy's gone, all his burial goods are gone, robbed. But following Zoser was Sekhemkhet. And the pharaoh Sekhemkhet hired, or more likely Imhotep was obliged to design Sekhemkhet's pyramid. And unfortunately, the pyramid never got very tall. My thinking is that Imhotep died, Sekhemkhet outlived Imhotep, and whoever Imhotep's successor was couldn't quite handle the job. People talk about how Imhotep would have written a book that said, this is how I built the pyramid. My thought is that he described how he built the pyramid, but he didn't put in one crucial fact that was probably secondhand to him. He didn't put in the logistics. Imhotep's successor couldn't keep all the workers from tripping over themselves. He couldn't keep them fed properly and everybody have supply lines of water and food and transporting the blocks to put them in place. The whole system probably, let's just say it didn't work well enough. Sekhemkhet's pyramid, robbed of stones, but tunneling, no problem. Sekhemkhet's pyramid has this big long tunnel that has rows and rows of caches for burial goods. But again, it was never finished, probably never filled, and it has this very interesting ramp going down to subterranean chamber. And when I was there, we got to go in it. It was really, really incredible. The workers had to dig out down to the door down here. There's a door with a lock and key metal door. And while they were digging out, 2 of the workers had bags so they could catch pigeons for their dinner that night. Inside the pyramid, they found this alabaster sarcophagus, absolutely gorgeous. And when they found it, it was sealed. The door was shut. They opened the door, and guess what they found? Absolutely nothing. But really neat thing, on top of the sarcophagus, you can still see the ashes from a desiccated wreath of flowers that was placed on top of the sarcophagus. It was sitting there the whole time. After Sekhemkhet, the layer pyramid. Nobody knows who built it, but it fits chronologically, and chronologically, the next pharaoh, they say that this was built by Kaba, or a pharaoh named Kaba, nobody knows about the architect. But again, it wasn't finished. And they call it the layer pyramid because it was built in what they call accretion layers. You can see the stones were kind of leaned up one against another in these layers and trying to get taller and taller. Nobody knows if it was built as a step pyramid. This way it looks like it had many steps, but nobody knows for sure. Now the next pyramid was built for a pharaoh named Huni, and again, nobody knows for sure because Huni's name never appears in the pyramid, but according to the texts, he was the next pharaoh, and Huni had a general by the name of Sinephrus. And Sinephrus, being a general, he understood logistics. He knew how to move his troops. And so I think that's why Sinephrus was such a great pyramid builder. He was hired by Huni to construct his pyramid, and Sinephrus wound up marrying Huni's daughter, so he was next in line to become pharaoh. But this pyramid had big problems. They did build it quite tall, almost a success. They actually dug into the pyramid, and also in the descending passage that goes down into the rooms inside the pyramid, they can tell that the pyramid was built in 3 stages. First, it was built as a 7-step pyramid. The 7th step really wasn't finished. Then it was enlarged into an 8-step pyramid. Presumably, Huni told Sinephrus, "I'm not dead yet. Don't finish my pyramid, make it bigger." Then eventually, it was attempted to be turned into a true pyramid with smooth sides as opposed to a step pyramid. Now, I said this pyramid had big problems. The blocks were laid leaning in towards the center of the pyramid. That leaves unbalanced forces. And unbalanced forces, when you're building and using lots and lots of heavy structure on top of these unbalanced forces, it's more unbalanced and more unbalanced. And as a step pyramid, if the blocks aren't laid at such a great angle, it's not a big problem. But right here, when they enlarged the 7-step pyramid into an 8-step pyramid, the designer probably looked at it and said, well, it might be really neat if we line up the new step of the 8th pyramid with an old step of the 7-step pyramid. Fatal flaw. We'll see it after a while. Now, like I said, first it was built as a 7-step pyramid, then enlarged to an 8-step pyramid, but never completed. And when Huni died, this part of the pyramid, E3, was not there. So when Huni died, it was left as an incomplete step pyramid. This part of the pyramid that would have been the true, or E3, the true pyramid, was not completed. It was not there when Huni died. And in the descending passageway, there's places where the seams from the blocks all line up and they go all the way around the passageway. And that is a main indication that there used to be an entrance here, and then they built out further. And we have 2 of those, one there where this is where the 7-step pyramid finished. Its original entrance was there. Then the 8-step pyramid was there, and you can see from the drawings where the steps would have been if you could see them if the pyramid was cut in half. This part of the pyramid was built, but it's not there anymore. We'll get to that later. Now, interesting things about this pyramid. When you go down into the pyramid, you have to climb a ladder to get into the burial chamber. And right here, 5,000-year-old cedar. You climb the ladder right past it. You can touch it. It's all smooth from everybody touching it. There's another piece of cedar right here. You can't reach it. Right here, when Charles Regano was speaking last year, 2 years ago, he mentioned that there's a block up there. The block's kind of discolored, and it looks like it could move. It looks like it was placed such that there's something behind it. When he said that, I agree. I thought that when I was in this pyramid, and who knows? But I'm not the first one. I'm not the only one that says that's a possibility. This is what the Meydum Pyramid looks like now. When Huni died, it would have looked something like this. And we'll get to why it looks this way. I'm trying to do things in a chronological order, so we're not there yet. So after Huni died, Sinephrus went on and started building this pyramid, which is called the Bent Pyramid, because it has this strange bend where it goes from about 57 degrees down to about 43 degrees. When we went in it, right here you can see the scaffold that goes up to the entrance. That scaffold wasn't there. We actually had to climb the rock and then edge over to the entrance. I'm actually a little mortified of the danger that I put people in. I was fine, I'm a rock climber, but I had to climb the pyramid first and lay a little bit of protection. And so I was waiting at the beginning, at the entrance to the pyramid, for the other people to get in. And just this passageway is fascinating. Now, the first thing, that last picture was taken from right here, and you could see that step. The floor is damaged there. Presumably somebody wanted those blocks and took them out. Maybe they were easily accessible granite blocks or something, I don't know. But right at the entrance there's a hole there, and there's this strange cutout, and it's pretty apparent that this pyramid was designed to have a swinging stone door, balanced so that you could push it and open it, push it and close it. Of course, that door is long gone now, but the sockets for its hinges are still there. But even more fascinating, climb down this passageway a little bit. The seam for the blocks goes all the way around the passageway, and it's highly damaged. The blocks have moved. There's been a lot of settling right there. The Bent Pyramid was designed with two entrances that led to two totally independent passageways with chambers. So this chamber is actually this chamber. They originally weren't connected. We've got two entrances to each system of passageways and chambers. This one you can barely see high up on top of the pyramid, and this one is the one that we went into. So we have the northern entrance and the western entrance. And when you look at the western entrance, lo and behold, we find a seam. The seams of the blocks go all the way around the passageway, and there's some settling to that passageway. So again, there's an indication of an original entrance where they built out beyond that entrance to make the pyramid bigger. And those entrances, sure enough, they line up at 60 degrees. So it looks like the original intent for this pyramid was to build a 60-degree sloped pyramid. So inside the Bent Pyramid, there's this 60-degree structure with its own original entrances. And for our purposes, the original structure, called B1, below the bend, the 57-degree structure, calling it B2, and then above the bend, B3. We have the original western entrance, and we have the current western entrance, the original northern entrance, and the finished northern entrance. When we look at the northern entrance, this block, this is a tattletale. This block here was chiseled out. And when you see chiseling, that was the workers doing what they were doing. Somebody did that. And it's not like 100 years later, 1,000 years later, somebody came and said, oh, well, let's chisel this out. Somebody working on this pyramid chiseled out right here, and let's see why. Going back in time, you have to remember this part didn't exist. So we have to get rid of it. They're building this descending passageway that goes down to the chambers down here, and they're building the 60-degree structure, and we've got some workers that these guys go down the passageway every morning to go to work. This guy is going to work, and week after week, month after month, traversing this passageway, and what's happening, the problem with this pyramid is, again, the blocks were laid at a slant. And what they did at the time, the MO, was to place the blocks perpendicular to the face of the pyramid. So this block is laid 30 degrees from level ground because it's a 60-degree slope on the edge of the pyramid. And tilting your blocks 30 degrees and trying to place them and place a lot of heavy weight on top of them, big mistake. But they've never dealt with these kind of forces before. So, if you watch this block, slowly, as they placed more weight on top of it, this block would have moved. In fact, all the blocks were moving, but being at the entrance, it was most apparent there. So eventually, somebody coming in and out of the pyramid looks up, says, hey, wait a minute, that's supposed to be smooth. So he tells his foreman, or his overseer, we've got a problem here. Somebody made a mistake, and they misplaced this block. And the foreman says, well, I don't want to get in trouble. Hide it. What should I do? Well, take a chisel, cut it out, make it smooth again. That's what he did. And sure, it looks good, nobody will see it. Pharaoh won't know. But as they put more weight on top of those blocks, this block would have moved more and moved more. More weight you put on top of it, he probably would have been watching it. And he says, uh-oh, I might get in trouble. I'm going to chisel it again, make it smooth again. And it's chiseled twice. You can see where the chisel marks have been chiseled away twice. So he tells his foreman, and the foreman says, yeah, good job, just make sure it looks good, but let's keep an eye on it. But as they kept building, uh-oh, it kept moving. And well, what do you do if you have this kind of problem with moving blocks? And why do blocks move? Stop work. Stop work on the pyramid, get everybody out. We don't know what to do. Call it a failure. They had to stop work on the pyramid. And when they did that, the western entrance was filled with plug blocks. The slanted part of the passageway was totally filled with blocks, blocking that entrance off. And the pyramid sat incomplete. So Sinephrus took his work crews about a mile to the north and built this pyramid. It looks like it's highly experimental. So remember, the bent pyramid was not the bent pyramid yet. It was this incomplete 60-degree structure. Now, the red pyramid, it's called the red pyramid because it has a red tint to its stones. And if you look at it, it's this low angle, it's 43 degrees. It's not very impressive, but it is very big. But being such a low angle, it's not very tall. The entrance to the pyramid, remember, it was the entrance block that was moving. Well, what do? Make the entrance block really big. Hopefully it won't move. Now also, it's 43 degrees. If you place the blocks perpendicular to the face, that makes the blocks slanted 47 degrees, which is more than halfway to perpendicular. In this pyramid, they laid the blocks flat. They didn't slant them at all. Also in this pyramid, if you look in the chambers inside the pyramid, the floors of these chambers were built with long, narrow blocks. And if you're looking for moving blocks, you can see something move that's long and narrow easier than some square, clunky movement. So these blocks, I think, were designed to investigate and look for movement in the blocks. And in fact, the gap between those blocks was originally left open so that if there was movement, they'd have some place to move into and they could measure that and see if there was movement. That gap was left open. Also, in the ceilings, they have these holes cut in the ceilings. Any good miner will tell you, if you want to know if a rock is moving, you put in a tattletale. A tattletale is where you cut two holes across from one another, and you take some kind of stick, put it up in those holes, and that way you can reach up and you know how much that board's going to move. And if that board gets tighter or looser, then one of the stones is moving. So it's a tattletale. It tells you if the stones are moving. So in the ceilings, these are called Cobalt Ceilings, all these holes there, they could have put beams across and every once in a while throw a ladder up there and say, no, the board is where it's supposed to be. They built this pyramid with blocks laid flat. Good idea, good design, no problem. They did not have blocks moving. And so this pyramid was a success. It was the first true pyramid, except the pyramidion up here, they found pieces of it. The pyramidion is 57 degrees, which is the same as the bottom of the bent pyramid. So this pyramid, they actually designed it to be almost a true pyramid, except the very top, the last stone that was on top was 57 degrees instead of the 43 degrees. So it had a little tiny bend at top. An interesting thing about this pyramid is right here you can see the original floor for this passageway and this chamber. If you go into this passageway, we have pictures of my dad standing upright in this passageway. He's a tall man. The floor of this passageway was dug out, and the floor of this chamber was dug out, and it's damaged. And also there's holes here, and there's actually some holes in the ceiling. It looks like they took something very big and heavy out of this chamber, lowered it down, and took it out. Presumably it was the sarcophagus of Sinephrus. In the Great Pyramid, the sarcophagus was built too big for the entrance. It was built inside the king's chamber, and the chamber was built around it. So presumably the sarcophagus that should have been here was built inside this room with no way out, but then for some reason they wanted to get the sarcophagus out, so they had to dig a whole lot and do a lot of work to get it out. And one thing, tomb robbers, they want to do as little digging as possible. This digging here was by orders of the king. Now, moving back to the bent pyramid, we've got the original structure. Maybe, since the last pyramid was a success and Sinephrus is still alive, we can encase this structure, we being the Egyptian workers, and hide it. Maybe have a successful pyramid on top of it. Inside the chambers, there's this strange vertical shaft that was built. First it was dug down here, and then it was placed inside the superstructure. So this is in the northern set of chambers. In the western set of chambers, there's this strange pit. This shaft room and the pit don't line up. But you could tell the workers, oh yeah, we're building this because they're going to line up so that this passageway will connect with this passageway. That might have been a deception plan to fool the workers into thinking that, oh hey, if I tell my kids that if they can sneak into the northern rooms of this pyramid, they can go up this shaft, which might connect to this shaft, and they can get to the burial chamber where all the gold and all the burial goods is going to be, and they can rob it and get rich. Fool the workers, didn't connect. Workers, maybe they tried to get in there later, and oh, didn't connect. Don't know. That's my theory on why those two structures are there. Originally, the chambers from the north and the chambers from the west did not connect. The passageway up here, the western passage, was filled with blocks. This room was totally inaccessible. Huge room with a huge corbelled ceiling. There was problems with moving blocks. Is there a problem with this room? Well, they didn't have access to it, but if they dug a tunnel between the ceiling of the northern chamber to the passage in the western chamber system, then it could be accessible. And that tunnel right there, you have to climb. They've redone it. I think they allow tourists into the Bent Pyramid now. It's really cool. But early 1900s, they built this scaffolding to get a ladder up to the entrance to that tunnel. And if you look, originally, there were steps that went from down here up to the entrance to the tunnel. That tunnel, crawling through it, it's big. It's comfortable to crawl through. And if it's big, it was not tomb robbers. It was the king ordering it. And these steps were built so that the king could come down into the northern passage, walk up the steps, get to that tunnel, cross the tunnel, and get to that room to inspect it himself, to decide, we've had problems with this pyramid, should we continue on and try and finish it, try and encase it, do something with it? The verdict was yes, because they took this 60-degree structure and they completed it into what we now see as the Bent Pyramid. Most theories about the Bent Pyramid, they say that, oh, well, the pyramid was originally designed to be this huge, steep structure that was 57 degrees, and then they had problems, so they backed off on the angle and made it 43 degrees. That's what a lot of the mainstream books that you read will say about this pyramid. I totally disagree. And they also totally ignore the inside 60-degree structure. What I say happened was they originally wanted to build the pyramid at 43 degrees all the way around. The reason why they did that, well, the North Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, was built at 43 degrees, and if they had done this, this pyramid would have been a mirror of the Red Pyramid. Same height, same angle, the two defining characteristics of a pyramid. And that is also mirrored in their names. This is the Shining Pyramid of Sinephrus. This is the Southern Shining Pyramid of Sinephrus. Same name, possible same design. But somebody came along and said, hey, your father-in-law's pyramid, sitting out there, it's incomplete. Maybe we can turn it into a pyramid and encase it while we encase this other 60-degree structure. Hey, great idea. So if you make this part of the encasement of B1, if you make it steeper, all these blocks are not placed, less manpower. You send the manpower back to Meydum to finish father-in-law's pyramid as a true pyramid. And this, I think, was designed to be the first true pyramid. So that was the idea. Build it as a bent pyramid. From the get-go of this design, they knew they wanted to make it a bent pyramid. What about the movement of these blocks? We had problems here. What is putting all this structure onto the outside of this going to do to the blocks that moved? Good news, nothing. Putting the blocks out here is not a problem. And these blocks were placed almost flat. They're only at about a 6-degree angle. The problem occurs when you want to put the blocks on top. The blocks on top increase the weight, increase the load on top of the blocks down here. And blocks are going to start moving again when you try to finish this structure. Therefore, this part of the pyramid, B3, it was built in a hurried way. It's sloppy work. The blocks are place and go, place and go, place and go. And the reason why is because down here, the blocks started moving again. And as they move, they're placing the blocks up here. It's like they're trying to outrun these moving blocks. Let's get this finished quick before those blocks move all the way. And this is what it looks like today. They even dug to the side of the passageway. This here is looking from the top. So they dug out to the side of this passageway to see what they could see and try and find out, do more to find out why these blocks moved. And actually, this is part of B2. They moved the most. Going back to Meydum, well, they'd already started work trying to turn this pyramid into a true pyramid, but I already told you there's a fatal flaw. When they got up about this high, they're placing blocks on this step, the fourth step of the 8-step structure. When you place blocks on that, there's the weak spot right there. All that was finished smooth. The only support that this part of the pyramid had was that little bit right there. And what would have happened as you placed more weight on top of this step is you get subsistence, and the blocks right here, remember this is part of the 8-step structure, this is part of the true pyramid and enlargement, those blocks would have separated. You would have been placing blocks out here, and you would have had a gap here. And the more blocks you place, the larger the gap is. It separates out. And that would have been totally apparent. It would have happened all the way around the structure. Moving blocks, panic, stop work on the pyramid. Therefore, this part of the pyramid was never completed. And this pyramid for 1,000 years probably stood as a true pyramid, but at the top was never finished and it had parts of the steps sticking out of it. Now, we're going chronological. Why it looks like what it looks like today, we'll get there. Going back to the northern entrance to the finished bent pyramid, again, they put a huge block there, worried about that block moving. When it came time for the Great Pyramid, look at what they did to the entrance. They put a huge block there, and right here, this is the very first instance of a gabled roof. Gable is where you place the two blocks slanted against each other, and it gives a pointed roof. They wanted no chance of any blocks moving in this one, but remember, in the bent pyramid, it was because the blocks were placed slanted. In the Great Pyramid, the blocks were placed flat. No problem. Every roof before this was corbelled, where the blocks were placed a little bit in, a little bit in, a little bit in, until the blocks were close enough that you could span the top up here. And the nice thing about a gable roof, one block balances the other. So if you do it right, it's not a problem. But they didn't know if they were doing it right. They were experimenting. We'll see a little bit of that later. Once they got the gable down, by the time of the 5th and 6th dynasty, they really went to town with the gabled roofs. But we're not going to go that far. In the Great Pyramid, that's the Queen's Chamber gabled roof. And in the King's Chamber, this is the very first true rock span roof. These are built with huge granite blocks. And at the top, there's this gabled roof. Always remember, pyramids took time to build. When the Great Pyramid was about this tall, this tunnel did not exist. They call this the well shaft, and it was dug at some time after the descending passageway and the subterranean chamber were begun. Not only that, the beginning of the ascending chamber was dug out. So This and all this up here was not part of the original plan of the Great Pyramid. Later, they dug this out. Why? Well, here's the well shaft, and this one I have to give credit where credit is due. This is my dad's theory, and this is the one that I'm stealing before he can talk about it in secret passages. It makes sense to me. I like explanations that make sense. So they go down, they're digging, they're tunneling down, they're digging this chamber, which intended to be the burial chamber of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, the pharaoh. But while they're building it, while they're digging, in limestone, there exists perched water tables. That's like a small pond that's in a pocket in the stone. And if you're digging along and you hit it, this chamber very well could have, nobody knows for sure, could have filled with water. Uh-oh. What do? You stop work on that chamber and you go through a redesign. Now, part of that redesign was to dig the passage and redesign everything up here. I'm not going to talk about that redesign much. After you have that water, maybe you want to use that water to give to the workers who are up top working in the sunshine, in the hot desert sun, so that they can have some water when they're up top. This tunnel, they dug through the solid rock, the bedrock below the pyramid. Then when they got to the superstructure of the pyramid, they had to dig through the placed blocks of the pyramid, and when they got to this level, the tunnel is not dug, it's placed rocks, placed stone from about here up. So that is an intentional redesign by the workers, by the builders of the pyramids. I just want to say all these redesigns, aliens did not build the pyramids. They did not come along and say, oh, well, we did this, oops. Hey guys, redo that, do it different. So it was people. They dug this passageway up to here. They also dug the entrance to the ascending passageway here. And then after a bit, these blocks were placed so that this passageway was built into the pyramid as opposed to being dug. And the top of this tunnel was built into the pyramid as opposed to being dug. Going to the king's chamber. Why do you do this? It stands out like a sore thumb in any cutout drawing you see of the Great Pyramid. Why do you do ceiling, 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 and then a gabled ceiling? I have my own theory. It has to do with moving blocks. They didn't know, what are these slanted blocks going to do to the inside of the pyramid? Well, let's experiment. My thought is they put this ceiling there to protect the chamber, but above the ceiling, place the slanted blocks. These blocks here would have been pressing against blocks here, and the grand gallery, with its corbelled ceiling, it had all these niches on the blocks. And those niches, if these blocks were pressing hard enough, they'd make those blocks move. And with the niches, you could see if they moved. You could go up and measure them, throw a ladder up there. Do it once, do it again. Are these blocks going to make these blocks move? Actually, the answer they got was no, but find out, do it again. Are these blocks going to make anything move until you finally get to the top? This was a huge experiment to find out if the slanted blocks made the other blocks move. Also, the air shafts, the famous air shafts that are supposed to be pointing to the stars so that the king's soul can swoosh down and visit his body and then swoosh out, and this king's soul can come from the northern unperishable stars and go to the stars of Orion, which doesn't really hold water because these passageways are bent, so they don't really just point right to the stars. And there's the old adage, when an archaeologist doesn't know the purpose of something, it's religion. The gods, they were doing it to appease the gods. No. Give these air shafts a physical purpose. Now these air shafts, they come out of the Queen's chamber, and they also come out of the King's chamber on either side. And they're, 10 inches square? Not big enough for anybody to crawl through, not big enough you can get your arm as far as you can get your arm back there. The air shafts in the Queen's chamber don't go to the outside. They were blocked up here. The air shafts for the King's chambers actually do go to the outside, and they put a fan in there to control the humidity for the tourists. But famously, in modern times, they sent the robots up the air shafts to see what they could find up there. I don't think that these guys were the first ones to send things up and down these air shafts. I think these air shafts were conduits so that they could tell if blocks were moving inside the structure of the pyramid. And my thought is something like a sledge with a bell and a rope. So you have a big long rope that goes down, probably another rope that goes up so that you can retrieve the sledge. Every month, every 10-day week, you send your sledge up and down these air shafts, and you pull, and if the sledge goes over a bump, you're listening and you hear the bell ring. And there's actually places where there are bumps that were designed into it so that you hit that bump and you know where you are. That, rope's still 100 feet out, and ring, yeah, that's where it's supposed to ring because we know that bump's there, we put it there. But if you're pulling along and and the bell rings when it's not supposed to, maybe that block moved, causing a bump in there. But like I said, blocks in the Great Pyramid were laid flat, good design, no problem. So the Queen's chamber, or the Queen air shafts, finished their purpose. They sealed them off. When they put the robots up there, they found the plug blocks up there that had, copper handles to place the block in there. The air shafts to the King's chamber were always open. People who go into the King's chamber would see little holes in the walls, little tunnel that goes that way. In the Queen's chamber, they were sealed off up top. They were also sealed off down below. Dixon found these. I think he also found the air shafts. So somebody was taking a wire, poking it into any crack that he could, anywhere in the pyramid, and he put the wire inside the walls of the Queen's chamber. This wire went in too far. Maybe there's something back there, and this was early 1800s or late 1700s. They didn't care. He went ahead and pounded on the wall, broke holes in the wall, and found the air shafts coming out of the Queen's chamber. And in one of the air shafts, I think it was the northern air shaft, he found these relics. This copper relic found a diorite ball, stone ball that's harder than granite so that you can pound on granite and break granite up, and found this wooden stick that looks like maybe it attached to that at some point. It was broken. Also, later when they sent the robots up, they found the rest of the broken stick. So when they were sealing this shaft, guys with long sticks, maybe he broke the stick, or maybe they had one of these and it was broken and somebody said, throw it down there. It slid all the way down, and they found this. I read an interesting website, showed how this makes an excellent survey tool. In fact, he patented it. Patented a 4,500-year-old survey tool that was found inside the Great Pyramid. Somebody threw it down. One of the workers threw it down before this air shaft was sealed up. Great stuff. So, pyramid was finished. All the sides were finished with fine Tura limestone. Everything inside the pyramid was done as much as they cared to. Supposedly Khufu was buried in the pyramid. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody's found him. Nobody's found his grave goods. The only thing they found of Khufu is a statue that's about 2.5 inches tall. When they finished the pyramid, the grand gallery here was filled with plug blocks, and the plug blocks were allowed to slide down to fill this passageway up, and there's 3 granite plug blocks here. Nobody knows for sure because it was dug out before there was good records, but supposedly this whole passageway was filled with limestone blocks, and that makes sense because there's enough debris that was thrown down here that whoever dug out these blocks threw the debris from digging down here. Also, there's the well shaft. The workers who climbed up in here and slid the blocks down here, the workers are behind the blocks, they were not sealed in the pyramid. They could climb down the well shaft, get down to the descending passageway, and then climb up and out the pyramid. So this passageway right here was totally sealed from start to finish. There's still more to the Great Pyramid. At the top of the Grand Gallery, there's a hole up there, and there's this tunnel that was dug. And this tunnel was dug by someone who knew what was back here, i.e., one of the builders, somebody who had access to the plans, somebody who still cared about the pyramid. So this was still in ancient times. And why would they dig this tunnel here? Well, there it is, subsistence. This one, if you read, the subsistence is exaggerated 10 times over, but there was subsistence. My thought is the subsistence occurred because of an earthquake. Earthquakes do happen in Egypt, and this earthquake caused a crack or a fissure in these big long ceiling blocks. You can see the cracks right here. They've had modern repair work done to them. After the pyramid was complete, they felt this earthquake, said, uh-oh, what would this have done to all these ceilings? They had access through the well shaft to get into the king's chamber. They look up and they see cracks in the ceilings. Well, what about the ceilings above? Maybe one of the ceilings broke, fell on top of this ceiling and made it crack. They wanted to find out what happened, so they dug this passageway to get into this chamber, which is 2.5 feet tall. You crawl into it. I've never been in it. Get in there and see if there's too much damage, find out what happened. Not too much damage, just some cracks. It's okay. They did not go further. But a little bit out of chronological order, early explorers, Caligula was late 1700s. He went through this passageway that was dug by ancient Egyptians, found this chamber right here, and he figured he could dig down, and he tried to dig to the air shaft to see if he could get to that air shaft and find out if there was anything more to it. 50 years later, early 1800s, a guy by the name of Colonel Howard Giza came along, and he had gunpowder. He had a hashish smoking local who managed the gunpowder for him. People are always amazed that they didn't blow themselves up. So Caligula tried to dig down to the air shafts. Giza decided that, well, if there's one of these chambers, maybe there's more. So he took his gunpowder and dug, found another chamber, which he named after first Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon, and Horatio Nelson, who also defeated Napoleon, named the next chamber after him, went up to Lady Fitzgerald, named a chamber after her, and then Campbell's chamber, who was a high-up official in Egypt at the time, found all these chambers, and that's how we know the structure's here. Inside these chambers, they found graffiti that was done by the workers of the pyramids. Somewhere up here is actually the cartouche that has Pharaoh Khufu's name, so that is how we know incontrovertible proof that Khufu was the pharaoh who built this pyramid. I don't have time to go further, but here's the Great Pyramid. After the Great Pyramid, Djedefre, who was supposedly Khufu's son, tromped off a couple miles to the north and built a pyramid up there. It's high up on top of a rock escarpment. It's got a great view of Giza down below. Supposedly his pyramid was never finished. Maybe he died too soon. Maybe there was a lot of stone robbers who took the stones to build other things. Then Khufu's other son There's always talk of a coup or murder, some kind of intrigue in the royal court. Khufu built the next pyramid at Giza. Menkaure, Khufu's grandson, built the next pyramid at Giza. There's a pyramid out at Zawat al-Aryan, close to the Layer Pyramid, I guess. This pyramid was built to be almost as big as Khufu's pyramid or Khafre's pyramid, but it was built with a mud brick structure that was only lined with limestone blocks so that it looked good, but structurally inside it wasn't sound. I don't know how high they got. We can't tell because it was incomplete. Giant mastaba built out of huge stones. By the time of Menkaure, moving 40-ton blocks was no problem to these guys. And then we move into the 5th Dynasty pyramids. These pyramids, again, they were built with debris inside and just cased with nice limestone blocks. So they looked good, but inside is just kind of rubble. There's 6th Dynasty pyramids, there's 12th Dynasty pyramids, there's even 13th Dynasty pyramids. There's more than 100 pyramids built in Egypt that they found. But we're not done yet. The Meydum Pyramid, it collapsed. That's what happened. It had structural problems. But when did it collapse? So inside, on the east side of the pyramid, there's this small temple. And inside this temple, it's a strange temple, there's no other temple like it. You go through, and on these walls in here, there's graffiti from the 18th dynasty, which is more than 1,000 years after this pyramid was built. This pyramid stood like this, with the top incomplete, for at least 1,000 years. And then in the 22nd dynasty, they dug into this debris pile and put commoner burials, noble burials, in this debris pile. So sometime between the 18th and 22nd dynasty, the pyramid collapsed from that structural flaw that I told you about. And again, I think the reason why it collapsed is probably an earthquake hit, and the weak spot right there gave way, and it was catastrophic collapse. Would have been loud. One of the graffiti in there, just because it's kind of cool. May cool myrrh rain down from the heavens, and fragrant incense dip into the temple roof of Horus Sinephrus. There's lots of 18th dynasty graffiti in there, but they said it was a beautiful pyramid at that time. This temple right here was accessible. It wasn't buried. Eventually, when it did collapse, this was totally buried by the debris. So this was originally placed, but then right here it broke and collapsed, giving us this rubble heap. There's the weak spot that went all the way around the pyramid and kind of looked like that after it collapsed. A lot of books you'll read will say that this is disappeared because of stone robbing, taking the stones, building other structures. Doesn't make sense to me. So this is what the Meydum Pyramid looks like now. And again, you can see that weak spot where everything gave way, crashed down. Now, moving back to the Great Pyramid. We're not quite done. Inside the Great Pyramid, if you've ever been there, there's the original descending passageway, but all the tourists enter through this passageway. They call it the Forced Passage. And it was dug later times, not by the Egyptian builders of the pyramids. The story that you read in all the books is that an Islamic caliph by the name of Al-Mamun, he didn't know that this entrance was here because it was all covered up, which doesn't make sense because Greek and Roman texts talk about going down into this passageway. They never talk about the ascending passageway and going up to the Grand Gallery, the king or queen's chambers. But the Greeks and Romans definitely went down this passageway. So supposedly The Greeks and Romans knew about that passageway, but Al-Mamun didn't. So he started digging in the north side of the pyramid, dug, and his method of digging was to heat the rock with flame, take vinegar, throw it on the rock, which would weaken the rock, and then take logs and pound on the limestone rock until it gave way and remove the debris. Now that is how he dug it, but the story says they're pounding away here, and there used to be a trapezoidal block that covered right there. The story is that that block came loose from the shaking from pounding, breaking away the blocks over here, 20 or so feet away, loosened it, made it fall down the passageway, which they're in the pyramid and they hear, and so they decided to make a 90-degree turn and found the plug blocks. They found the descending passage, which supposedly they didn't know was there, and found the ascending passage and started digging up towards the other chambers. That doesn't make sense to me. At some point, this passageway didn't exist. If Al-Mamun did know about this entrance, his men could have gone down, maybe they were tapping on the walls with hammers and on the ceilings, and found maybe right here the blocks sounded kind of hollow or something was wrong. So they dug there and they got this trapezoidal block loose and out and found, hey, granite plug blocks, plugging something. So they dig around those blocks, climb past there, found this passageway, which was filled with limestone blocks. Don't dig granite. That's tough. But if you can, you dig limestone. That's why they dug around the granite blocks and dug out the blocks that were blocking this passageway and dug all the way up to here. At this point, everything's open. Not only that, they found the well shaft, which was probably concealed by the builders of the pyramids, and here they are investigating the well shaft going down, so now they knew that they could go up and down that, and they climbed up into the grand gallery, they climbed back towards the Queen's chamber, but when you climb up to the grand gallery, let's see, yes, you get to this antechamber. There was 1, 2, 3 granite portcullis blocks lowered down, blocking their way, and it was totally lined with granite. Can't dig the granite around these blocks. You break up 1, 2, 3, these 3 granite blocks here that were blocking something behind it. I'm sure their imaginations were running wild. When they found these granite plug blocks here, they're workers. They're hired by the Pasha, by the Caliph, to investigate the pyramid, and then they come back to Grand Sheikh Al-Mamun and, Sire, oh great one, we found something. Well, he wants to see it. They dig out behind there, they dig all the way there, so we found something. The big fat Caliph, who has been waited on hand and foot for his whole life and who really enjoys his food, they dig a big passageway to get around those blocks. They push his fat butt up past those granite plug blocks. They get him up here. And they've already broken out these things, and they say, Sire, we've found a box, a sarcophagus in here. The Pasha comes up, and he wants to find out. Supposedly, the sarcophagus in the king's chamber originally had a lid. There's holes drilled in it and a lip where the lid sat. So easier than lifting off the lid, break the corner out of the box, and probably Al-Mamun himself took a torch, stuck his head in there to see what he saw, see what he could find, see what kind of treasure was in there. And what did he find? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, as the story goes, they found a bag with just enough gold to pay the workers who had done all that digging. These workers were absolutely frustrated. They took these blocks that they dug out of here, and they're actually scattered around the site. But there was a lid there. It's gone now. This box is too big to fit out through that passageway. But the lid isn't. You could take the lid and cock it sideways at an angle and fit it down there, and take that lid, lower it down the ascending passageway. But instead of taking that lid around these blocks and down here, lowering it down there, and then lifting it back up there, it's easier to dig limestone, so they dug this passageway out that way to get the lid out. That makes more sense to me. I have to give credit. I didn't look up his name, but that is not my theory. You can look it up on the internet. It's not generally accepted, but it's what I believe happened. Now, getting more current, the Great Pyramid used to have smooth casing stones. And the bent pyramid, because the way the blocks were placed slanted, it's hard to get those stones off so that you can use them in other structures. But the Great Pyramid, they took all the blocks off, and most pyramids, they've took all the fine Tura white limestone casing blocks off, and they built the citadel, the Islamic fort that guarded Cairo. All the casing blocks from this pyramid, most of them from Khafre's pyramid, many pyramids, they took the blocks, built the fort to protect Cairo. Now, moving on, the last thing, up at the very top of the pyramid, there's this wooden structure. What is it? Why is it there? Well, on December 9th, 1847, astronomers previously, at least 12 years before, knew that sometimes Venus passes in front of the face of the sun, and they could use that information from many places around the world to measure and calculate the mean distance from the Earth to the sun. And when they looked at Egypt, they said, hey, this is a perfect place, not a lot of clouds, don't have to worry about the weather. The pyramid itself would be a perfect place to make this type of sighting, the perfect structure to have a reference point to make these measurements. So they put this wooden structure on top, and the top of the wooden structure is supposedly about where the top of the original pyramid was, so that they could measure Venus passing in front of the sun and find out for the first time, maybe not the first time, maybe the Egyptians did it, but find out how far the Earth was from the sun. So there's the sun there and the famous sunset shot through the pyramids. Thanks for coming.